Welcome to Education in Focus. I'm your host, Eliana Kernodle. The Oklahoma Supreme Court heard oral arguments last week on a case to determine the future of what could be the nation's first religious charter school. Joining me is Chalkboard News editor Brendan Clary. Brendan, tell us more about the school at the center of this case. What is it and where is it at in the process of getting started?
Yes, absolutely, Eliana. So this is the school's name is called St. Isidore of Seville Catholic Virtual School, which is kind of a big mouthful. A lot of people just call it St. Isidore. And essentially, it is a religiously affiliated virtual school, right? So it's with the diocese, the archdiocese. So it is like a statewide virtual school. So we have virtual charters, which different iterations of that in a lot of different states, right? Where it's like a state funded, or the federal funds go to it as well. But any student who's in that state can use that and register there and enroll there for free. And that's the charter school aspect is that it's public school in that you don't have to pay as a student to attend, but it's privately run and operated, right? And so what kind of comes down to the heart of this is that the state's virtual charter school board, which approves those kinds of things, gave it the green light and said, yes, we give you the approval, even though it's a religious school. And so that is what set off this legal battle in which we had the the Oklahoma Supreme Court's oral arguments last week, where both sides were putting out, this is how the law should be interpreted and what it means for this program, right? So they're both sides are able to say this is what the law says and this is what it means for whether or not the school should be approved, right? So that's sort of the crux of it is. Kind of getting right into it here is, does the state's constitution prohibit public taxpayer dollars going to a religious school? So that's what the Attorney General is arguing before the Supreme Court and is arguing in a lawsuit that is filed from the state of Oklahoma. Then on the other side, you have the state's virtual charter school board, which is represented by the Alliance Defending Freedom, which has kind of put its hat in the ring, I guess, for this, and has for a number of other fights, legal fights, around the country. And so what they're arguing is that the school, because it's religious, does not mean that it should be excluded from public benefits that are afforded to other private operators. So what they're saying is that if you look at the state law, the state law cannot prohibit religious schools from getting the same benefits as all other schools, because that violates the U.S. Constitution, right? That it treats people differently based on their religious affiliation. And so they're saying you can't do that. So now you kind of have this tension between the state law, which says you can't use public money for religious schools, and some of the doctrines as well of the Establishment Clause in the Constitution of you can't establish a church with the state, right? So there needs to be that separation there. And the concern there from the Attorney General Gentner Drummond is saying, what if people don't believe this? Their taxpayer money is going to support ideas that they do not agree with. So it could run against their deeply held religious beliefs or just deeply held beliefs, right? So would an atheist have a problem with their taxpayer money going to a school that is explicitly religious or Catholic, right? And saying these things. So it's one of those kinds of questions that it gets to is like, what does the law say? What kind of takes precedence? And how is this going to work? And this is going to, maybe have national implications, right? So if you look at this school and this charter board, we've seen a lot of push for school choice, a lot of different school choice options in a number of states. So I think that's sort of the next question is, if this goes through here, what's to stop advocates for school choice from saying, look, we need to do this everywhere, right? And so that's an interesting thing as well. So I was talking with the ADF lawyer, and he essentially just said, and it's Philip Seckler, he was saying the state's school choice law, essentially it wants to promote different kinds of schooling options, right? And that would include, and that's what their argument is, that would include operators who are maybe religious, right? As long as they get all of the other qualifications in line and then they apply for that, and then they can't be turned away just because it's a religious school. So they're basically saying this is what the law intended. It was to create school choice options for parents. And this is something that the state said we are willing to trust private operators with as long as they apply to this, and that it would be unfair and in fact illegal for them to discriminate on the basis of religion. So it's kind of this interesting, we have different state laws that are saying these conflicting kinds of things. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what the Oklahoma Supreme Court says. And I imagine, and I know you haven't even asked about this, but I imagine that when the state Supreme Court rules on that there'll probably be an appeal to the federal Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court. So I can see this going all the way up to the top because of the kinds of questions that it raises, and also because the attention that has been sort of put on this, because, people get really riled up about this. I mean, you have a lot of advocates against school choice who are saying we need to just fund public schools better. And then you also have a lot of people pushing for school choice and saying, look, this is, the students should be able to attend whatever, school they want with public money. And then this would be sort of like the extension of that, right? That they should be able to attend, if they want to, and it hits all the other criteria, they should be able to attend a religious school. So that's sort of the interesting, again, these sort of legal questions that are maybe in conflict with each other, but we'll kind of have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, it sounds like there's kind of two different understandings of what public education could be that are kind of played out in these laws. One of them, which sort of just understands public schools as being like one institution run by the state, as it used to be. And then you have kind of the school choice vision, which is more embodied in this, I'm assuming probably newer statute that's prescribing having a wider variety. And those are sort of running up against each other. And that's kind of playing out in this case.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that it's, we do have that, okay, here's the old, this, conception of the state will not establish like a religious school. Like that, there's sort of or like any kind of religious entity, you can't prop it up with public funds. So there's like that prohibition. But on the other side, you have like a relatively newer law to try to bolster school choice. And so then, they're starting to run up against each other. So it's just going to be really interesting to see how that plays out, Eliana.
Well, thank you for your insights on this story, Brendan. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at chalkboardnews.com.
Some people would call him a loser. He ran for state office. He was beaten. He started a business. He failed. He ran for Congress. He lost. He was nominated for vice president. He lost again. But he knew only those who never tried are the real losers. And Abraham Lincoln was no loser. Persistence. Pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at Value.